This story is titled My Family Humiliated Me. And Saeed, I was worth nothing until I bought a $200 pile of junk from a farmer. Hey Reddit, ever been treated like a walking joke by your own family? Yeah, that was me. But, plot twist, life had other plans. Buckle up, grab your snacks, and get comfy, because this one's a wild ride. So let me start with a background. I, 32 male, was always treated unfairly by my family since childhood. They favored my younger brother, 29 male, Ethan, over me. Like, when we were kids, Ethan's kindergarten finger paintings went in expensive frames and hung in the living room where visitors could see them. But me? I found one of my drawings in the garbage when I was 8 and stopped showing Mom my art since then. As we got older, it only got worse. Ethan joined Little League, and my parents never missed a game, even when his team sucked and he mostly warmed the bench. They bought him new equipment constantly and threw him ice cream parties whether his team won or lost. Meanwhile, I saved up my allowance for months to buy model car kits and spent hours putting them together with insane attention to detail. When I asked if I could display them on the mantle, Dad said they didn't match the decor and banished them to my room, where Mom would accidentally break them when cleaning. By high school, it was straight up ridiculous. Ethan joined the debate team, and my parents drove 3 hours each way for his tournaments, staying in hotels and taking him to fancy dinners after. I joined the auto shop program and finally found my place. I was actually pretty good with engines and loved the work. The teacher even let me take on more advanced projects because I picked things up quickly. I made it to the state competition and won first place in my category. My parents? Sorry, we can't make it. Your dad's got a thing at work. For graduation, Ethan got a new laptop. I asked for tools for my planned mechanic career. Dad got me a cheap set from Harbor Freight that broke within a month and told me to get a real job instead of playing with cars, because apparently fixing things that people rely on every day isn't real work. Now, as adults, it's just more of the same and worse. My parents have Ethan's corporate achievements printed and framed on the wall in the hallway. His first promotion letter, his MBA diploma, a photo of him with the CEO. Meanwhile, my high school diploma, trade school certification, and A's master mechanic license got nothing but resentment. LMAO, they hated the fact I was a mechanic. At this point, it's almost impressive how consistent they've been at making me feel like garbage for loving something that actually makes me happy. When I moved out, my place was anything but a house. For a while, I was living in a trailer that shook whenever trucks drove by too fast, heater that was either freezing or burning hot, bedroom the size of a closet, kitchen wherever I put down my takeout bag. But at least nobody was there telling me what a disappointment I was 24/7. But I was good. I was saving money for new tools, used to visit my family occasionally. And let me tell you, every damn family gathering was the same. Ethan would roll up in his decent suit, talking about his latest promotion at his corporate job. Dude barely did any real work, just endless meetings and PowerPoints, but was pulling decent money. He had a pretty wife, a Tesla he was probably making payments on forever, and a regular condo that my parents acted like was freaking Buckingham Palace. Nothing crazy special, but way better than my situation. Meanwhile, the first show up with grease under my nails after a 12-hour shift at my garage, and my mom would literally sigh when she saw me, as if my life choices were physically painful for her to witness. Dad was always asking when I was going to get a real job at least twice per family dinner. Then he'd launch into some story about how Ethan just got another bonus or whatever. My aunts and uncles would smile at me with that fake pity that really meant, "Thank God our kids didn't turn out like you." The final straw came last Thanksgiving. Ethan had just gotten some promotion, and my parents brought out an actual cake to celebrate. A cake. At Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, the first mentioned I'd finally paid off my toolbox, and my dad actually straight up laughed, and said, "Well, I guess we should be thankful Jensen didn't go bankrupt this year." Everyone laughed with him like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. Then my mom started with her usual, When are you going to get a real career? Routine. Before I could even answer, Ethan jumped in with, maybe Jensen could work for me. We need someone to clean the office parking lot. The whole table erupted in laughter. Even my cousin's kids were giggling, and I was sitting there getting humiliated by my own family. Felt like they all shared this interest in making me look and feel like crap. But it was what happened next that broke me. My dad raised his glass for a toast and said, "To Ethan, the son who didn't waste his potential." No one even looked at me, like I wasn't even there, like I didn't even matter enough to acknowledge how deeply that cut. In that moment, I realized they didn't just prefer Ethan, they didn't see me as worth anything at all. And that left a deep wound. I stood up fast, knocked over my chair, nobody even cared or asked if I was okay, grabbed my jacket, and walked out. I could hear them still laughing, my dad saying, "There he goes again, can't take a joke." I sat in my truck for 5 minutes, hands shaking on the steering wheel, swallowing back what felt like broken glass in my throat. That was the last time I went to a family dinner. Little did they know, this failure was about to turn his life around in a way none of them could imagine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For months, I still ran this tiny garage. The sign was half broken and only lit up at night when it felt like it. Business was, well, it kept me eating most days. I'd fix radiators, change oil, patch tires, the basic stuff that doesn't make you rich but keeps the lights on most of the time. My neighbor, Gary, made it his personal mission to remind me how pathetic my life was. Dude would literally stand outside in his nasty-ass bathrobe, watching me work, making comments about my high-end repair business while sipping whatever was in his mug at 7 a.m., definitely not coffee. The customers weren't much better, always haggling over prices like I was running some kind of charity. "Can't you do it any cheaper?" they'd ask while standing next to their $60,000 SUVs. Sure, let me just pay my bills with exposure and good vibes. Most days, I was just going through the motions. Wake up in a cold trailer, grab gas station coffee, fix cars, go home to my empty trailer, repeat. The American dream. Am I right? My social life was basically non-existent. Hard to date when you're always covered in motor oil and can barely afford to buy yourself dinner, let alone take someone out. So there I was, living the dream in my crappy trailer, eating gas station burritos and fixing beater cars for people who haggled over every damn dollar, until the day came and changed my life in the most unexpected ways. One morning, after dealing with a particularly annoying customer guy, wanted me to basically rebuild his transmission for the price of an oil change, my phone rang. Unknown number. It was old Joe Garrison. Hadn't heard from him in years. He used to let me help out on his farm when I was a kid. One of the few adults who didn't treat me like I was one step above scum. Joe was this classic, old-school farmer type, the kind of guy who could fix anything with duct tape, baling wire, and pure stubbornness. His barn was always full of half-finished projects from, like, the Reagan era. So Joe says he has some heap of metal sitting in his barn for decades and wondered if I wanted it before he sent it to the scrapyard. Something in his voice made me curious, and honestly, I needed a break from staring at the pile of overdue bills on my counter that were organizing themselves into pay me or else formations. Driving out to Joe's place was like a time machine. Same old faded billboards advertising motels with color TV. Like that was still impressive. Same potholed roads that the county promised to fix every election year and mysteriously forgot about the day after. Joe hadn't changed either. Same overalls, same cigarette permanently attached to his lip like it was growing there. His barn looked one strong wind away from total collapse. When I went inside and my eyes fell on something in the dark, Joe wasn't big on fancy things like adequate lighting, holy crap. Under decades of dust and grime was a 1967 Shelby GT500 ACR. My jaw dropped. My heart literally skipped. For you non-car guys, finding this in a barn is like finding an original Picasso at a yard sale priced at $5. I tried to act cool while checking the VIN to make sure it was legit, but I was so stunned that I dropped my phone twice. I asked Joe what he wanted for it, trying to sound casual like, "Oh yeah, just another day finding legendary muscle cars in barns." When he said, $200, the same price the scrapyard offered for the weight, I thought I was having a stroke. This car, even as a rust bucket, was worth way more than everything I owned combined. Like, not even close. I mean, WTF? That was the one chance that would never repeat. Without thinking, I paid him before he could change his mind, or someone could burst in and yell, "Just kidding!" I tried to act like this was just a normal Tuesday transaction and not me basically winning the lottery. Joe didn't even seem to care, just pocketed the money and asked if I needed help loading it. The man had no idea what he just let go of. Towing that car back to my place was when the circus started. The second I pulled into my driveway with this dusty Shelby, my neighbor Gary started cackling like a hyena choking on a chicken bone, called over other neighbors to come see what Jensen dragged home this time. They all stood there, pointing and laughing like I just brought home literal garbage. One of the teenagers actually called out, "Hey man, you building a parade float?" Real comedian kid. Future in stand-up for sure. Later that day, my phone went nuts. Ethan called first, of course. Wanted to know if Dad was serious about me buying some junk car. I told him it wasn't just any car, it was a Shelby GT500. His response? "Oh, great. So you spent money you don't have on a rusted-out piece of history nobody cares about." Then he launched into this whole lecture about how I should be investing in my future instead of playing with garbage. Rich? Coming from a guy who went into debt for a Tesla just to look cool in the company parking lot. My parents called next. Dad wanted to know if I'd finally lost it. And Mom just kept sighing into the phone like I'd personally ruined her retirement plans. I hung up mid-lecture. Looking at that dusty Shelby sitting in my driveway, I decided I was going to restore this car. If it killed me, then rub it in all their smug faces. But reality hit pretty quick. I had exactly $112 to my name. That was it, just enough to keep the lights on, buy groceries, and maybe start on the car. But a full restoration? That takes serious cash. Parts for these classics aren't exactly on the clearance rack at Walmart. The smart thing would have been to sell it right then, make a quick profit from a collector, and move on with my life. But I've never been accused of doing the smart thing. That's not my brand. This wasn't just a car. This was my shot, maybe my only shot at proving I wasn't the family failure they all thought I was. I was all in. Consequences be damned. And listen, I had no idea yet how much this pile of junk was about to change my entire life. The next few months of my life were basically work, car, sleep, sometimes repeat. I'd work my regular job all day fixing other people's beaters, grab whatever cheap food was on sale at the gas station, then work on the Shelby until 2 or 3 a.m. First order of business was seeing what I was working with. It was worse than I thought. The more dirt I cleaned off, the more problems I found. Rust had eaten through parts of the floor pan. The upholstery looked like several generations of mice had called it home, and the wiring was a nightmare. Previous owner had done some creative modifications that would have made an electrician cry. And finding parts? Total nightmare. Online sellers wanted insane money for absolute crap. Some dude in Texas wanted $1,200 for a steering column that looked like it had been used as a boat anchor for the past decade. The setbacks just kept coming, like they were on a damn schedule. First, I found a whole mouse family living in my engine bay. They chewed through wires, built nests everywhere, and basically turned the car into their personal condo complex. One of them actually poked his head out while I was inspecting the damage. He had the audacity to look like he was charging me rent. Then my first attempt at painting was a total disaster. I'd watched like 50 YouTube tutorials thinking, how hard can this be? Turns out, very hard. The paint came out all uneven and somehow highlighted every flaw instead of covering them. Had to sand it all down and start over, wasting time and money I didn't have. Speaking of money, it was disappearing fast. I'd burned through most of my savings, and the car still needed tons of work. Parts, tools, materials, it all adds up quick. So I did the only thing I could. I bet everything. Walked into a bank and took out a $50,000 loan secured by my trailer and garage. If the restoration failed, I'd be completely homeless. Working nights on the Shelby became my new normal. My hands were constantly covered in cuts and grease that no amount of scrubbing could remove. My back felt like hell. I was surviving on energy drinks, and whatever food could be eaten with one hand while the other held a wrench. One night, while digging through the glove box, I found something interesting. An old pack of Marlboros with a yellowed note tucked inside. It said, "Take care of her. She's got more heart than most people I know." Reading that note, sitting there covered in grease and exhaustion, I realized someone had actually loved this machine, and now it was my job to bring it back. Progress was painfully slow, though. Every time I fixed one thing, I'd discover 3 more problems hiding behind it. It was like playing mechanical whack-a-mole. The engine needed a complete rebuild, the transmission was shot, the suspension was basically being held together by rust and prayers. But slowly, very slowly, the car started coming back to life. The frame was solid again. The engine block was cleaned and ready for rebuilding. The interior was stripped and prepped for new upholstery. It was still a long way from done, but for the first time, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And man, that light looked a lot like a middle finger pointed straight at everyone who'd laughed at me, especially my family. Every night was the same routine until one afternoon, while I was under the car wrestling with a bolt that must have been installed by Satan himself, I heard someone clear their throat. Smacked my head coming out smooth move, I know, and found this woman with a camera standing there. Her name was Lila, 28 female, and she said she was a photographer working on a project about American craftsmanship. She'd spotted the Shelby from the road and wanted to take some pictures. I was about to tell her to get lost, not in the mood for more people laughing at my junk car, but something stopped me. Unlike literally everyone else in my life, Lila didn't look at the car like it was garbage. She walked around it, nodding, asking smart questions about the restoration. She actually knew her stuff too, identified it as a 67 Shelby without seeing any badges. Asked about the original specs, what parts I was keeping original versus updating. Not the basic car pretty, vroom vroom questions that most people ask when they're pretending to be interested. When she asked if she could write about my project for her blog, I figured, why not? At least someone might get something out of my suffering. Plus, not gonna lie, having an attractive chick actually interested in my project was a nice change from my neighbors pointing and laughing. Lila started coming by regularly. She'd take photos while I worked, documenting the transformation. What really surprised me was how she'd jump in to help researching parts online, connecting me with collectors, even getting her hands dirty when needed. She didn't seem to mind the grease or the long hours. It was weird, honestly. I wasn't used to anyone actually believing in one of my projects. About a month later, her blog post about my restoration project blew up. The comments section exploded with other car nuts offering advice, parts, and encouragement. Some dude in Montana actually mailed me an original Shelby emblem for free. Said it had been sitting in his garage for years and belonged on a car being properly restored. Suddenly, my inbox was flooded with messages from strangers offering parts, tips, even wanting to come see the car in person. It was surreal. Some guy with a YouTube channel about classic cars wanted to do a feature. Then a local news station called. Then a car magazine wanted to do a spread. Overnight, I went from that loser working on a junker to that dedicated craftsman saving American automotive history. Funny how perception changes, huh? And guess who suddenly remembered I existed? Yep, my family. Mom called, acting concerned about all the attention and whether it was distracting me from finding stable employment. Translation: you're still a loser, but now people are noticing you, which reflects on us. Ethan showed up at my garage uninvited in his Tesla. He walked around the Shelby with this look like he was smelling something, pretending to be impressed while pointing out every flaw he could find. "You know," he said, thinking he's being helpful, "you should sell it now while people actually care. Strike while the iron's hot." When I told him I wasn't selling, he switched tactics. "Well, if you're serious about this, you should let me handle the business side. That's my expertise, after all. Translation: let me control any money you might make because clearly you're too stupid to handle it." Later that evening, my parents dropped by too. Then they offered to help me if I sold the car. Dad would put something together to invest the money properly. After years of treating me like a failure, now they wanted to swoop in and take over when there was potential for profit. I couldn't believe the audacity. They'd never supported me, never respected me, and now they wanted to cash in on my hard work. I told them all to get lost. Okay, I use stronger language than that, but you get the idea. Meanwhile, Lila and I were spending more and more time together. She was smart, funny, and for some reason seemed to actually enjoy my company. It was nice having someone in my corner for once. With her help, the restoration picked up speed. She found some guy in Nebraska who had an original carburetor for half what I'd expected to pay. Another time, she tracked down a set of vintage wheels that were perfect. The car was finally starting to look like a car again. So, after countless all-nighters, thousands of dollars, and enough frustration to fill the Grand Canyon, the Shelby was finally finished. And let me tell you, the transformation was insane. Sorry for the caps, but I get excited even writing about it. What had once been a rust bucket was now a gleaming blue and white masterpiece that looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line in 1967. I stood in my garage just staring at it for a solid hour after I finished the final touches. And God, the beauty of that baby made my heart melt. Every chrome piece shined. The interior smelled like fresh leather, and the paint job was flawless. Second attempt was the charm. It didn't even look like the same car anymore. But the real moment of truth was turning the key. I'd completely rebuilt the engine, and despite triple-checking everything, there's always that moment of, did I mess something up, when you start it for the first time. I slid into the driver's seat, took a deep breath, and turned the key. And that V8 roared to life like a beast. No coughing, no sputtering, just raw American muscle announcing its return to the world. The sound vibrated through my entire body, and I'm not ashamed to admit I got emotional. After all those months of blood, sweat, and maxed out credit cards, hearing that engine purr made me forget all the suffering. Lila was there, catching it all on camera, looking as pumped as I was. "Holy crap, Jensen," she said. "You actually did it." The fact that she sounded surprised tells you how bad things looked when I started. When she asked what I planned to do next, I told her about Meckham Auctions in Chicago. If you're not familiar, it's basically the Super Bowl for classic car sales. The best of the best end up there, and serious collectors come ready to drop serious cash. It was time to see if all this work would actually pay off, or if I just created the world's most expensive hobby. Walking into that auction was intimidating as hell. $1-million cars everywhere. Rich collectors in expensive suits, and me in my nicest pair of jeans and a button-up I'd bought specifically for this day. I felt like I was crashing a party I shouldn't be at. But when they rolled my Shelby onto the stage, the room changed. People were actually impressed with my work, my car, the piece of junk everyone had laughed at. The bidding started at $200,000. I nearly passed out when they announced the starting bid. My hands were shaking as the numbers kept climbing. $250,000, $300,000, $350,000. Lila was squeezing my arm with each bid. When the hammer finally dropped at $500,000, I thought I was going to pass out. $500,000 for a car I bought for $200. The room erupted in applause, but it sounded distant, like I was underwater or something. After taxes and fees, I walked away with $400,000 more money than I'd ever imagined having, more than I'd make in 10 years at my garage. Life-changing money. While I drove back home, I kept checking my phone to make sure the bank transfer was real, that I hadn't hallucinated the whole thing. Lila and I stopped at some bar in Chicago to celebrate. For once, I wasn't worried about the bill or calculating how many oil changes I'd need to do to afford it. As soon as the money hit my account, my phone blew up. Not with congratulations, nope, it was my family. Mom called first, suddenly talking about how they'd always believed in me and how they'd sacrificed so much raising me. She actually suggested I should give back to the family now that I had been blessed. Her exact words, "Your father and I put everything into raising you. We sacrificed so much. And now that you have this blessing, don't you think it's time to give back?" I nearly choked on my soda. Give back? Where were they when I was working until my hands bled? Where was this family support when I needed a loan for the restoration? Really? And after all the disrespect and humiliation, they still got the nerve. Lol. But wait, it didn't stop there. Ethan was even worse. Suddenly, I was his bro, and he had all these investment opportunities that needed capital. He kept saying crap like, "I can help you grow your money." Funny how he never offered to help when I was struggling. He actually said, "Look, man, I've been thinking. You did good with the car, but if you really want to grow your money, you should invest in something solid. I've got a business idea." I hung up before he could finish his sentence. Then came the parade of relatives I barely knew. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who'd ignored me for years were suddenly texting about catching up. One cousin straight up asked for a loan to start a business. Uncle Rick called about some can't-miss real estate opportunity that just needed a small investment. Even my mom's weird cousin, who I'd met maybe twice, reached out asking if I could help with his kid's college fund. Funny how you get all the attention once they smell you have money. Lila watched me scrolling through these messages with this disgusted look on her face. When she asked if I was going to give them money, I said, "Of course not. Have you lost your mind? They can go screw themselves." I laughed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back at what my family thought. I wasn't desperate for their approval. I wasn't the family screw-up anymore, and that felt even better than the money. With $400,000 in the bank, I had options. I could have bought a nice house, invested in stocks, or just chilled for a few years. Hell, I could have blown it all on stupid crap and still been ahead of where I started. But Lila and I had bigger ideas. Over burgers one night, we mapped out our plan. Lila suggested focusing on classic restorations, high-end stuff like what I did with the Shelby, but as an actual business. The next day, we checked out this massive garage space just outside town. It had room for at least 10 cars, multiple lifts, and an actual office. By the end of the day, I'd signed a lease, and Crow's Muscle Works was officially born. I hired mechanics who knew their stuff and set up the shop exactly how I wanted. Lila handled all the business stuff, marketing, bookkeeping, website, social media. She also had this crazy ability to finds classic cars that had been sitting forgotten for decades. Our first major project was this 1969 Dodge Charger we found rotting in some farmer's backyard. Months of hard work later, that Charger rolled out of our shop looking factory fresh and sold for $150. Within a week. Word spread fast. Our waiting list grew to 6 months, then a year. We expanded, hired more people, and by the end of our first year, we'd broken $1.1 million in revenue. Not bad for a guy who was eating gas station food a year earlier, right? Through all of this, Lila and I became more than business partners. One night, after locking up the shop, I took her back to that bar in Chicago where we'd celebrated my auction win and proposed. She said yes before I could even finish asking. With the business booming, we bought a house near the lake, the kind of place I used to drive by, and wonder who the hell could afford to live there. Of course, Ethan couldn't stay away. He showed up unannounced, pretending to be impressed with my latest project, a 70 Chevelle. Then he started pitching me about expanding the business and bringing in investors, meaning him, obviously. I cut him off and told him if he needed his Tesla painted, I'd give him the family discount of $600, which was about double the going rate. The look on his face was priceless. But there was one last thing I needed to do. Lila and I drove back to Joe's farm, finding the old man still sitting on his porch, sipping tea like nothing had changed. When I handed him an envelope with $50,000 inside, he tried to refuse it. I told him I wouldn't be where I was without that car, and it wouldn't feel right not sharing some of the success with the guy who made it possible. He finally took it, grumbling about me being stubborn. That night, sitting on the deck of our lake house with Lila beside me, I thought about how far I'd come from the family disappointment to running a successful business, doing what I loved, and having this woman with me during all this. Man, I couldn't be more grateful. I was living my dream. My family always said I'd never amount to anything. I'd never find stability. They were all wrong. And the best part? I didn't need their approval anymore. Edit. Hey, it's been so long, Redditors. I just wanted to say stay tuned because I'm giving you a wild update soon. LMAO. You won't believe karma has a sense of humor. Update. Hey, Reddit. OP here with the promised update. It's been 2 years since my last post about the Shelby restoration and starting my business. A lot of you asked for updates, so here goes. First off, thanks for all the support on my original post that meant a lot during some really tough times. For those who need a refresher, I was the loser brother who bought a rusted Shelby GT 500 for $200, restored it, sold it for $500,000, and started my own classic car restoration business while telling my toxic family to kick rocks. Now, life update. These last couple of years have been incredible. Crow's Muscle Works has become the name in classic restoration. We have a 2-year waiting list of clients willing to pay premium prices. We've expanded to a staff of 15, and I've got more work than I know what to do with. Lila and I got married 1 year ago. She still handles all the business side, and now she's my perfect wife. I still get my hands dirty in the shop every day to perfect balance. Life couldn't be better. I basically never thought about my toxic family anymore. Haven't spoken to any of them since Ethan showed up trying to get a piece of my business 4 years ago. I blocked them all after my dad suggested again that he could help invest the money properly. So I haven't heard from them. Too busy, too happy, and I didn't bother bringing them back into my life now that I'm thriving. They stopped trying to contact me too for 2 years. But then yesterday the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Imagine my face when I opened the door to see my parents and Ethan standing there, looking like they'd aged about 20 years. My dad's hair had gone completely gray, my mom's face was lined with stress, and Ethan, the guy who used to show up in press suits, with that smug smile, he looked like absolute garbage. "Oh wow, you guys look like hell. What do you want?" I said. "Jensen, it's been a while. Can we come in? We need to talk," they said. I should have slammed the door right then, but where would be the fun in that? I needed to see it for myself, because if they hadn't got beaten up by karma, what could possibly have brought the Golden family to my doorstep after all this time? So I stepped aside and let them in. They sat awkwardly in my living room, eyes darting around at the expensive furniture, the view of the lake, the photos of me and Lila with our classic cars. My dad cleared his throat about 5 times before Ethan finally spoke up. "So, nice place you got here," he said, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. "Thanks, I know, right?" I replied. "What do you want?" My dad finally got to the point. "Son, we're in a bit of a situation." Ethan's. "Well, there's been some unfortunate developments." Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch. Turns out, Karen, of course her name was Karen, Ethan's perfect wife, had been planning her exit strategy for years. She'd slowly convinced Ethan to put their house and both cars in her name for tax purposes. Then she emptied their joint accounts, filed for divorce, and moved in with some real estate bro. I had to hold back the laugh. The golden child was reduced to living with his parents again. Sometimes the universe delivers. My mom jumped in. And with your father's medical bills and the mortgage, we're struggling, Jensen. So you came to me for money. Of course you did, I said flatly, not a question. We're family, my dad said. Like that explained everything. We've always been there for each other. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Always been there for each other? That's hilarious. Where were you? Oh, right. You were telling me to get a real job and mocking me at Thanksgiving dinner. Humiliating me in front of everyone. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Look, Jensen, we all make mistakes. Shut up. I cut him off. A mistake is buying milk when you meant to get orange juice. What you guys did was systematic, deliberate abuse for years. My mom started crying. We were just trying to motivate you by telling me I was worthless? By toasting to your only son who didn't waste his potential? That's not motivation. I was tossed aside, told I was nothing. My dad tried again. Son, we're proud of what you've accomplished. We really are. And we know we don't deserve your help. You're right. You don't. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear them thinking about how they'd miscalculated this whole situation. Really, Jensen? Ethan finally said, a hint of the old entitlement creeping back in. You're just going to let your family lose their house? I stood up. Funny how I'm suddenly family now that you need something from me. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. My dad stood up, face red. You ungrateful little dad, Ethan warned, pulling him back. We need him. I laughed again as I showed them to the door. My mom tried one last guilt trip. Don't you want to reconnect with your family? Life is short, Jensen. I stopped and looked her dead in the eyes. What I want is to be surrounded by people who believe in me unconditionally. You didn't make the cut, and I already have those people now. Now get out and never show me your faces again. After they left, I watched their beat-up sedan, definitely not a Tesla, pull out of my driveway. Lila came up behind me. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. I'm great, actually. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Sometimes karma takes the scenic route, but damn if it doesn't arrive in style. Edit 1, damn, thanks for making it till here. You guys are legends. Edit 2, Jesus, the DMs are wild. To the guy asking if I'd adopt him because his family sucks too, I'm flattered. But no. To the dude suggesting I should have offered to help but with humiliating conditions attached. That's some next-level petty revenge I didn't even consider. But thanks for the mindful suggestion. Lol.